Palestinian struggle is not just a cry for justice. It's a blistering battle for the most fundamental human rights that every living soul on this planet should inherit by birthright. It's an unyielding resistance against the oppressive, suffocating grip of occupation and the callous denial of the most basic human dignity. Just as the civil rights movement in the United States fought against the chains of racial discrimination, so too do the Palestinian people strive to shatter the chains of occupation and tyranny. Never forget, my friends, that the Palestinians, much like African Americans in the United States, have been subjected to a heart-wrenching history of suffering and torment. The birth of Israel in 1948 brought forth the mass expulsion and dispossession of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their ancestral homes and land. This is a historic injustice that continues to haunt the lives of Palestinians to this very day. The situation in Palestine serves as a brutal reminder of the consequences of colonialism and the ruthless dispossession of indigenous people. It is an agonizing reminder that the fight for justice knows no borders, and we must stand united in solidarity with all oppressed peoples.
الذين صبروا على ربهم يتوكلون.
My name is Aiden Basiso and I'm 10 years old and I'm from America. I came to Gaza because my grandpa, because of his work, and we wanted to come to cheer him up, and I actually liked Gaza, so I stayed here for more than 2 months, so I stayed for a year. Then my passport got expired, but the American embassy didn't help us. They said they could only help Israel, only people in Israel, and that makes us sad. And then we were gonna go out of Gaza, but the Israelis, they bombed the borders when we were there. Then we went home safely. Then 10 minutes later, we had to evacuate our house because they said they're gonna bomb the house right next to us. And then the streets are like flipped. The houses are all on the floor. So we didn't have no choice just to go to my neighbor's house. And then now we're here. We came here for 4 days and still nothing hasn't opened. Aiden Basiso.
Your audience has to know, or should know, and would probably want to know, what is Gaza? Gaza is 25 miles long. For those in your audience who are joggers or runners, Gaza's its length is less than a marathon. Its width is 5 miles. And even in my old age, I jog 5 miles every day. It's not a long distance. Gaza is 5 miles by 25 miles. Okay. It's among the most densely populated places on God's earth, more populated than Tokyo. 70% of the people of Gaza, 70%, are refugees. They were expelled from Israel in 1948, and they and their descendants ended up in Gaza. 50% are children. That's Gaza, among the most densely populated places on God's earth, a tiny parcel of land overwhelmingly composed of refugees and their descendants and children. That's Gaza.
Listen to this bullshit. Hey Alexa, what's happening in Palestine? I'm sorry, I can't play topics like this for kids.
Now listen. Hey Alexa, what's happening in Israel?
On October 11, 2023, according to the Associated Press, the Israeli military said Wednesday night that hostile aircraft had entered the country from Lebanon. The news came after Hezbollah fired anti-tank missiles at an Israeli military position earlier Wednesday, claiming to have killed and wounded troops. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Last night, a friend of mine wanted to draft an email to her school's principal to ask him to run a donation drive for Gaza and for Palestine. So she went on Bard, which is the equivalent of ChatGPT, the Google equivalent of ChatGPT. She asked Bard to draft the email. In the next story, I'll show you what Bard said, although she had multiple prompts, as you can see. The font is kind of small, so take a screenshot and zoom in. So then she decided to just try a different prompt. All she did was replace the word Gaza, the word Palestine, with Israel. And look at the response. You know that someone programmed that into Google, right? Like, that's how deep the machine goes. The discrimination, the racism, the injustice, the misinformation, it runs that deep. So as you're watching the news and seeing whatever Biden is saying, whatever this guy is saying, whatever that guy is saying, just open your eyes and realize that whatever is sold to you as the truth is not the truth.
No, because we need to talk about how Israeli prime ministers and politicians changed their names to make themselves sound more indigenous to the land, even though they're all from Europe. Benjamin Netanyahu is actually called Benjamin Milekowski, and he traces his roots back to Philadelphia and Poland. Shimon Peres was born with the Polish name Szymon Persky, and his roots trace back to Poland. Bezalel Smotrich's surname is literally named after a town in Ukraine. Yair Lapid's father was literally called Tommy, and his DNA traces back to Hungary and Romania. That hobgoblin Golda Meir's real birth name is Mabovich, and she was actually Ukrainian. David Ben-Gurion was actually born as David Grun, and he only adopted that name once he took on colonizing as his full-time job after he left. Surprise, surprise, Poland. Ehud Barak Hebraized his surname from Brog in 1972. And his family roots trace back to Lithuania. Isaac Herzog might not have changed his name, but his family are from everywhere but Palestine. And Itamar Ben-Gvir's real name is the Khanzir of Israel. And of course we have to give a special shout out to Hollywood's golden colonizer, Gal Gadot. Or shall I call you by your real name, Gal Greenstein, originally from Austria, Germany, Poland and Czechoslovakia.
No one on earth has lived in Israel as long as we Jews have.
This is why I say that Israel and Zionism are not Jewish. They are completely and utterly secular. Whether you are Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, you can trace the beginnings of your religion back to Abraham. Abraham emigrated to what we now call Palestine from what we now call Iraq. He was an Arab. Abraham had a son named Isaac, who then had a son named Jacob. Jacob is who the 12 tribes of Israel are descended from. You cannot claim that the Jews were in Palestine before the Arabs when literally your own holy book tells you that you are descended from an Iraqi Arab man. Unless, of course, the holy teachings, the holy writings are not of much consequence to you, and really you're just interested in creating a white European nation state in the middle of the Arab world.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being the descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons, for real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, Egyptians descended from Ham. 600 years later, my brothers, read up. Moses was born in...
When you think Palestine, you may think violence, land seizures, and a decades-long Israeli occupation. But what you might not know is that another country played a driving role in causing the region's conflict: Imperial Britain. From 1516 to at least 1917, Palestine was under the control of the Ottoman Empire, a religiously diverse land where Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived alongside one another at peace for the most part. Then in the early 1900s, a small number of European Jews were trying to drum up support for Zionism and the establishment of a Jewish homeland. Just 20 years before, in 1897, the movement led by Theodor Herzl was initiated at a conference in Switzerland. They decided that they would advocate for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, but the movement at the time didn't have much support. And at the time, only around 8% of the population of Palestine was Jewish. At the same time, Arab nationalism was on the rise and many Palestinians wanted an independent state. Imperial Britain knew of both the ambitions of Zionists and Palestinians and used the situation to bolster their own interests. In 1914, amid World War I, Britain went to war with the Ottoman Empire. And in 1915, Henry McMahon, Britain's representative in Cairo, approached Arab leaders with a proposal. Britain would agree to Arab independence if they helped fight against the Ottomans. Then in 1917, Britain's Foreign Secretary wrote a 1-paragraph letter to Walter Rothschild, a leading figure in the British Jewish community. It read, "His Majesty's government views with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object." This letter became known as the Balfour Declaration, and it was in stark contrast to a declaration of the British and French armies in 1918, which assured the people of Syria, Palestine, and Mesopotamia of autonomy. So what was going on? Britain had promised independence to the Arabs that lived in Palestine, but then also promised a homeland for Jews on land that was already inhabited. Was Britain just transferring land that did not belong to them to whoever they liked? When the Ottoman Empire collapsed in 1918, the League of Nations gave Britain a mandate or administrative control of Palestine in 1920. It was a dual mandate. On one hand, they were to act on behalf of Palestinians, but on the other hand, they were to act on behalf of the international community of Jews who wanted to establish a homeland. Britain then drew up arbitrary borders, transferring the eastern bank of the Jordan River to the Hashemites. It was under the British mandate that Jews from Europe began to immigrate to Palestine and buy up land. The Jewish population in Palestine grew tenfold, from 60,000 to more than 600,000 between 1918 and 1947. Many Palestinians saw the mass influx of Jews as a European colonial movement, so as one might expect, it led to conflict. In 1929, riots broke out at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Both Palestinians and Jews lost lives. In 1936, after Jewish immigration increased even more riots broke out. This time, the British were heavy-handed and killed between 2,000 and 5,000 Palestinians. A Royal British Commission concluded that because Britain had allowed mass immigration, Palestine had 2 distinct societies that couldn't be reconciled. They recommended a partition of the land. The Arab Higher Committee rejected this, saying it was all their land. Britain then banned the Arab Higher Commission. They introduced the White Paper of 1939. It stated that Palestine should be a binational state inhabited by Jews and Palestinians, but that Jewish immigration would be limited for 5 years. But illegal immigration still went on, and violence continued to erupt. And when Britain couldn't handle the mess they had a part in creating, they handed the country back to the UN in 1948. The UN then decided to partition Palestine. The story gets a lot more complicated after this, but the British promising land which already belonged to Palestinians to other people has played a part in decades of conflict and bloodshed.
النكبة الثانية عن طريق قطع سكوت النكبة الثانية بخنف لي تقول انت ودينك مسخره وبس. عربي دوب عربي بكيفه. عربي ببنتنا. عربي بين الشباب. عربي ببنتنا. شو يربيت ما ديك لا لو دبر.
Settler violence, which is not really discussed within Israeli society. And when I saw through my view from the operations room was time and again how acts of violence against Palestinians are just under rug swept and covered up by the military that doesn't enforce the law on violent settlers.
So the fact that you're occupying Palestinian territory, that's the root of the problem.
There cannot be an occupation that will be moral or that will conduct itself in a good way. It's the problem is inherent in the mission, and the mission is occupying people without them having rights and dignity, and without them choosing to be under this control.
I've gotten orders and given orders to my own soldiers that I later regretted. I'll give you an example of something very systematic. There were a couple of times where my commanders gave us a box of flashbang grenades, and they just told us to start throwing them out of the driving car. When I asked why, they told us to make the Palestinians understand who owns this place. So from my own experiences, I know that this occupation needs to end. I know that it has nothing to do with the morality we expect from ourselves.
Inevitably, it will end because, like all other, oppressive regimes and undemocratic regimes, they fail to sustain, be sustainable. And I think deeply, as long as Palestinians don't have security, we're not going to have security as well.
Here, get the out of the country. This is Jewish country only. We don't need Muslims here.
We take house after house. All this area will be a Jewish neighborhood. We are not finished the job. We are going to the next neighborhood, and after that we will go more.
Only innocent people that are in Gaza now are the 229 hostage that were taken. Once they will go back to Israel, we will bomb Shifa Hospital, all the hospitals, all the tunnels, and kill them all. It's about time. The world knows that. There's no argue about that. We are the center of the world now.
For my family, I lost more than 20% of my family. This is white phosphor. This is white phosphor. You can see it. It's white phosphor bomb. It's in the middle between the houses.
This is, wow. If your Texas house was destroyed by Hurricane Harvey, you can get emergency funds unless you support the boycott of Israel. I'm not joking. 21 U.S. states have passed similar laws, which ban state funds going to people or businesses who choose to boycott Israel, a country which a recent UN report has labeled an apartheid regime. And now, survivors in Dixon, Texas, filing for emergency funds, have to sign a contract stating the applicant does not boycott Israel and will not boycott Israel during the term of this agreement. The state government is plainly telling its citizens that either they get to keep their right to boycott or they can get help rebuilding their homes. What kind of choice is that?
This is the power of the Israeli lobby. And there's one way that we can beat them. Just keep educating people, keep sharing, keep posting. They didn't bet on this grassroots action. The narrative is shifting. People are starting to wake up. They're starting to realize the truth of this issue, that Israel is based on a colonialist corporation, that they're destroying Palestinian homes, lives, and they've been doing this for the past 75 years. People didn't even know this, and now they do, and they didn't bet on that.
You probably wouldn't know it, but Gaza is rich, gas rich, at least 1.4 trillion cubic feet rich to be precise. But there's a catch.
Geologists and natural resources economists have confirmed that the occupied Palestinian territory lies above sizable reservoirs of oil and natural gas wealth in Area C of the occupied West Bank and the Mediterranean coast off the Gaza Strip. To date, the real and opportunity costs of the occupation exclusively in the area of oil and natural gas have accumulated to tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars.
Back in 1999, the Palestinian authorities signed a deal with British Gas. Just off the Gaza coast, they struck it lucky, and 2 wells were drilled. That's Gaza Marine 1 and 2. It was a multi-billion-dollar gift from God, an economic boon both home and abroad.
This is one of the key messages here today. There will be gas available for export. And from my conversations with Palestinian officials, including President Arafat, it is clear that they have no interest in just sitting on a gas surplus.
Fast forward to 2007, Hamas comes to power and Israel launches an offensive on the Gaza Strip, leaving behind 1,400 dead Palestinians, but taking with it the gas fields.
You're allowed to say that you didn't know. You're allowed to say that you shared this post a little bit too quickly. You're allowed to say that you did not know that the Israeli government is an oppressive government, a genocidal government, an apartheid regime confirmed by the UN, the Human Rights Council, and a bunch of other third-party organizations, just by the way. You're allowed to say you didn't know that. Because when you say you stand with Israel, it's one of two things. Option one, you're saying that you stand with colonization, you stand with apartheid, you stand with oppression. Or option two, you just didn't know. So just be honest. If you did not know, just come out and say it, because otherwise you look like a monster.